Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Barriers and Boundaries Resilience Leadership Podcast. And wow, healthy employees creating healthy organizations. And today we have Lauren Wittenberg Weiner, author of the upcoming book, I'm going to claim it, best-selling book, Unruly. And we're going to get into that. And Lauren, thank you so much for being a guest on the show today and allowing us to get to know you and learn more about this book. I've heard you talk about not being a door kicker, and I'll let you explain that. But what I've seen already is you're kicking down the doors of leadership. And that I think is going to be a great point for us to talk about today. But first, let's just get to know you. Thank you so much for being on the show. And how are you?
Can't tell you how much I appreciate you having me. I've been watching your shows and love the concept of the healthy employee and the healthy workforce in the workplace. I think it's critical, and I see so much of it that's not healthy on both sides. Yeah, on both sides of it. So I appreciate you starting to have those conversations. I think it's really critical.
Thank you.
I am not a door kicker. I am around a lot of door kickers now. So kind of backing up, my story is I left academia after getting my PhD and ended up happenstance at the White House doing policy work. I had no idea what public policy was. One of my friends was like, "It sounds like you really want to do public policy," and I was like, "That sounds fun." No idea.
Because that's what a psychologist does, just
Right,
automatically
exactly.
goes in.
Psychology, public policy, sure. So I kind of went, sure, okay. Kind of just buffeted along because I wasn't sure, having been in graduate school and expecting to be in academia. I kind of casted about and looked for something different. And that was an amazing opportunity. So I stayed there for about 4 years until I fell in love. And we were going to go on a cruise where my now husband says he was either going to propose or I was going to shove him off the side of the ship. That was probably true.
Looks like it worked out for you.
It worked out. He actually proposed. He forgot the ring, by the way. So he had to buy a necklace at the gift shop. But he did propose. But the day before we were leaving, he had been in the army, but he was a Navy civilian at the time. And he got a call from his old boss saying, "Hey, I'm here in Naples, Italy, and I would love to have you interview for a job here in Naples." So we got on the cruise. It was, "Will you marry me? Will you quit your dream job at the White House? Will you sell the house that we just bought and move overseas to Naples?" So we did. I said yes, obviously. We got married in 4 days, which is fairly typical military spouse, right? And we found ourselves overseas. And if anyone's ever been in Naples, I thought it was Under the Tuscan Sun. It was 2004, so it was right as Under the Tuscan Sun had just come out. So I was like, "Oh, this sounds great." And then we got to Naples, and I kid you not, we get there, our sponsors pick us up, and we took the back way into his office straight from the airport over after an overnight flight. And we're driving up through the alley, and there is a dumpster full of garbage, but it's Naples, and there's a trash strike because it's Naples, and there's always a trash strike. And so the garbage
Beautiful.
is 3 city blocks long and is on fire. And so
My goodness.
I looked at my husband, I'm like, "This is a literal dumpster fire. What have you done to me?" And then it got worse because I got there and they said, "Oh, by the way, military spouses are not allowed to have professional level jobs above a certain level of government service." And I had been at a fairly high level in the White House and showed up, and they were like, "You can be a GS7 until you get pregnant," by the way, is what they told me. And so this is again 2004, so not that long ago. So we started the company. Really, honestly, I started the company just to get some work back at the States until I could get home and restart my career. And it kind of took off. We started by using just military spouses that were phenomenal, and people said, "Wait a second, I got my first contract doing anti-terrorism," which I didn't know what it was at the time, aside from I could kind of figure out anti-terrorism, but I knew nothing about it. And then we did that well. Like I did that. I grabbed my eventually business partner to do some work with me. And then we started hiring more military spouses, and then kind of got a little bit more strategic beyond just military spouses overseas, built the company to eventually $100 million in annual revenue, which was crazy. Never what we expected to do. But the big claim to fame that we had was we won the Special Operations Command headquarters, their training and exercise program. So we helped run all of the military exercises around the world. And as a bunch of military spouses, they
No
were like,
small feat.
so I joke that I am definitely not a door kicker, couldn't kick down a door to save my life, but I love my door kickers. They were amazing. And we built the company both on military spouses and on kind of the operators themselves and the retired operators that we had working for us.
And there's so much, a lot of times these conversations happen. There's so much resilience in the story
Yes.
itself, and adaptability, just being able to understand the changing tides and with every place you went to. Was that something you think about at the time?
I don't even think I thought about me being adaptable at the time. I was just like, okay, I can't do that. Then let's figure out what I can do. Right. And so it was just, I don't do well sitting home. Like I'm way too ADHD to like sit, and I couldn't go on any more tours of Italy. They were wonderful. And I love the USO and thank God for the USO, but I couldn't go on any more USO tours. So I was like, I got to figure out something. And then I think it's really, at least for me, the adaptability is just finding whatever opportunity is in front of you and saying yes, and then figuring out how to actually make the yes happen. But there was a lot of people who turned to me later and they were like, number one, I heard a lot of, you can't do that. It's against the rules. And that's where the book Unruly kind of comes from, because it wasn't against the rules. We don't break rules, but there were ways of doing it. Or they said, well, I thought of that. And I'm like, yeah, then you might have thought of it. That's great. I thought of GPS well before GPS was ever invented, because I can't find my way out of a paper bag. So I thought of like, I really want some program that my dad, because I was young and I couldn't drive anywhere because I didn't know where I was going. So he would have to write down all of the directions before even MapQuest. And I was like, we really should have a thing in the car that tells you where you're going. But I didn't do anything with it, right? I didn't come up with GPS. I just came up with some concept that I didn't follow through on. So people would tell me all the time, oh, I thought of military spouses. Great, but you didn't do it, right? So you've got to actually take the steps to make it happen.
So you would say, let's fill in the blank here. Unruly is a GPS for.
So it's finding your own space within the rules. It is never, ever, I am a rule follower to the extreme. I've always been a good girl at heart, right? But there are ways within the rules to distinguish yourself. And so it's a GPS for finding your own space within the rules by really understanding the rules better than anyone else, and then knowing where the actual rules are and aren't.
There's an old philosophical saying. I forget who said it, and it's going to kill me until I find out, probably after the show.
Right.
But familiarity breeds unfamiliarity. The more you do something, the more kind of complacent you get, and the more like you forget like small details. And so for someone to come in and just say, no, I can do that.
Yes.
Did you even know the boundaries that were put in place for this? We're going to push it to the boundaries here. We're allowed to do that.
I mean, I feel like there was, particularly in the government space, which is where we were, but I think everywhere, there was this concept of like, well, I heard that you can't do this. Somebody taught me 10 years ago or 20 years ago, my mentor told me you can't do this. And they never went back to the source documents, right? And I grew up with a bunch of lawyers in my family. And I worked in the White House in the regulatory office. So we actually literally wrote and reviewed all the rules in the government. So I knew where the source documents were. And so when people would say you can't do that, I'd be like, okay, why? And inevitably it was, well, because it's against the rules. Okay, what rule? Right? It's not hard to then figure out, well, wait a second, that's not actually what the rule says. So let me figure out what the rule really says. And then we can figure out from there if we can do something. And sometimes the answer was no, you can't do that. And so at that point, what's the outcome that I'm looking for? And if the outcome was, I wanted to go from here to here and I can't do this straight line, can I go over here to here to here to back to down and get to the same outcome some other way?
A great approach. And how much goes into picking your battles?
Oh my God.
The mountains you climb. There's a lot of different analogies with that. But talk to me about, we could do that, and I know I can do that, but should I do that?
Yes, it's funny. My dad is my first and best mentor, and his biggest advice to me was choose your battles because I would fight everything, right? I would constantly, and he's like, if you're gonna fight, fight and fight hard and win. But if it's not worth doing that, then stop. You can try to do something, but if it's gonna be a fight, choose if you're gonna really fight or not, because if not, you're just wasting your energy. And so we were able to, I talk about getting unruly and changing the way that people do things. You can do the standard. You can figure, you don't want to reinvent your everything. Don't reinvent accounting. That is a bad thing to reinvent. Just do the standard accounting principles. Find the 5% that will distinguish you and make you not just different, but better than anyone else in that space that is different than what everyone else is doing, and do that. But 95% of it, follow the standard playbook.
For sure. And actually, I'm one of the coaches on my son's little league team, and they just won the city championship for where we are in California. And the whole season, it was just do the basics. You will get so much further if you just play routine baseball. Don't try to be over the top. You can get so much done if you just know the core of what you're supposed to be doing.
I
Hey, it
am
worked. It worked.
I'm a sports parent too. Both kids play hockey, and I am constantly telling my kids the same. Look, I don't play hockey. I have no idea. Like, I can't skate to save my life. I've tried with my kids, and it's really a disaster. But I have told them over and over again, stop with the showboating. Like, there's a goal called the Michigan, which you pick up the actual puck and sneak it around. Like, you put it on your. Stop trying with the Michigan. Please stop trying. You're not gonna get a goal. Get the high percentage goals. And then again, distinguish yourself a little bit with a tiny piece of what you're doing, but 95% of it, you're right, is just back to the fundamentals.
And how much of have you seen of that for your own success as essential to that success?
You know what, again, for me, it was know exactly what the real playbook is, right? How everyone else has done it and know it better than anyone else, right? So the rules, but also the unwritten rules of like how people play the game, as it were. And then finding that little distinguisher. But you've got to know the rules better than anyone, right? You've got to do all the homework. You've got to actually go and know what you're doing. And if you don't do that, if you haven't put in that work, you're never going to get to the next level, right? People, I think they try to take shortcuts and it's really just putting your head down and getting stuff done. Sorry, I'm around the military long enough that I was going to say something slightly
That's
less.
okay. That's
I
okay.
was going to say get shit done, but you got to get shit done, right? You
Yeah.
just gotta. And so a lot of people kind of sit and spin their wheels and do. I see a lot of it with networking. People are like, "Oh, I got a network. I got a network. Great, but you also have to get stuff done, right? Just stop networking and do. You got to network, certainly. You got to have your village. But then you got to do. And you're not going to get it right. You're not going to get it right entirely ever, and you're going to get things wrong more often than you get things right for a while. And then you're finally going to hit it and get it right, or tweak it as you go to finally get to right. But that's the secret there.
And that sounds like you're going to get lucky with the more opportunities you create for yourself.
Yeah.
Is that yeah.
Well, it's funny you say that. I hear all the time, "Oh, you got lucky." No, yes, we did everyone has some luck. I don't care how disadvantaged you are. I don't care how advantaged you are. Certainly, some people have more luck than others. I will not discount that. But everyone has luck. It's simply if you recognize the luck and take advantage of the luck. And so, people have told us over and over again, "Oh, you got lucky." Yes, but there were other people who had just as much opportunity to take advantage of the luck we had than we did, and nobody else did.
Yeah, it's almost like it's a secret that luck looks a lot like hard work.
Yeah.
And just positioning yourself to get lucky is, I mean, that's where the work is, right? All the behind the scenes, all the setup.
Yep. that whole like, iceberg kind of metaphor where you've got the tiny bit on the top that
Oh, it's
everyone
great.
is like, oh, it's luck. There's so much that went behind it. When we got our big contract at SOCOM, people were mad, first of all. A whole lot of people were really mad. But most of them were like, who are these chicks who just like got this? Who are they? They came out of nowhere. They did. No, we had been working for 15 years doing all the work. We had put everything together. We had done the right things. And then it looked like we got really, really lucky with this $200 million contract. But it wasn't luck. It was really hard work for a really long time. And then critically, we then executed it, right? So it wasn't just we got it and we're like, okay, we're on easy street. Then it was the really hard work began too.
There's that duality to it as well. You talk about doing exercise planning, but you're also planning for the future success of your business. So walk me through some of that as a leader, as CEO, that mindset of strategically developing a business. And I love some of your comments. Love to hear some of your comments on authenticity as well.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So look, when we set out to do this, we really didn't set out to do any of this. It was just it. I was in a situation where I couldn't find a job. We created jobs for ourselves and other people around us. But we did get very strategic. In the first couple of years, honestly, we were just catching. Like people were like, "Can you do this?" I'm like, "Sure." Can you do
Yeah.
right? But probably 3 or 4 years in, we were like, all right, let's get thought. This is clearly going somewhere. This is clearly going to continue past the couple of years that I was going to be in Naples, and I wasn't going back to my old job, which was great. So we got much more strategic in thinking about how we were going to build, but we built very slowly, which everyone told us consistently, you guys are doing it wrong. You guys are doing it wrong. And I was like, okay, we're doing it right for us. We're doing what we want to do in the way that we want to do it and what feels solid to us, even if it was outside of kind of what everyone told you you were supposed to do as a business owner. And we built from, 0 to probably 12, 13 years, we built to about 15 million in annual revenue before our big SOCOM contract. But at that point, we knew that there was a strategic cliff we were about to go down. Because it was we were growing out of small business status, which for government is a really critical piece. And we were facing what they called very evocatively the valley of death. Like terrible, a horrible thing to, and you're like, oh,
Sounds great.
I'm gonna die. Yeah, that's great. So I sat with everyone and just asked advice. And surprisingly, people were really open to giving advice about here's what we did right, here's what we did wrong. So I must have sat with probably 3 dozen owners or new CEOs that had come in after the sale or whatever, different firms and different levels of success at this time that they were facing this valley of death. And we came up with a strategic plan. And we were able to kind of sit and hit that strategic plan and then some. So we had said we needed to get to, I think we wanted a $20 million total contract value, big win, and then a couple of mid-sized wins between 10 and $20 million, which to us at that point were really, really big, right? And then we got the 200 million. And I was like, okay, we got there. And then we built then we had the next phases of it kind of sketched out from there. And we did all of those on time, actually early and higher than we had kind of set for a baseline goal. So we were able to.
And obviously, this being barriers and boundaries, healthy boundaries in the sense of you have people who are willing to mentor and kind of guide you and maybe help out. And in a sense, hey, here's something to be, thoughtful of or mindful of.
Yep.
What were, other than being female owned, because I know that's a big deal in the DoD contracting world, what were some other like barriers you feel like you came across that you just, when we talk about resilience, like you just had to bounce back, learn from it, and get back into it?
There was a constant need for feeling comfortable in your discomfort. Right. There was a constant need for not listening to everyone and what they were saying because we did things differently. And that's kind of where, again, unruly, it's kind of where we got to with this unruly concept is I'm not going to do it that way, but you had to be really comfortable in your own thought processes, and, going back to your question about authenticity, and really open with your team and get buy-in from the team.
How dare you?
Listen, thought I was crazy. I mean, when we went to sell the company, we specifically told our senior level team months, like, turned out to be more than we thought it was going to be because it took longer. But I think they knew 6 months before we sold. And everyone was like, "You're crazy. That is the stupidest thing you could have done." This is the greatest thing we could have done, because they figured out what we were doing. They had buy-in. They got to weigh in on how we were going to do it. And they got comfortable with what we were doing and who we were doing it with well before they had to sell it to the rest of the staff.
I
So
want
I
to
mean, that's
I want to
what we did.
insert some right there before, because I'll forget and we'll come
Yeah.
back to it. They responded to you in that moment. I want to highlight that too. Let's say there's someone who just took over a business, or they're a new leader, they're a new manager. How important it was for them to be comfortable enough to respond to you, yeah, in that moment, for them to be honest and open.
I'll tell you, it wasn't the
That's a
staff.
culture thing. That's a
Yeah.
culture thing.
Yeah. So my staff would never come back to me and say I'm crazy, thankfully. But we did have a very open. So there were people outside of us that were like, "You're crazy." My staff around us, the team that we had built, had a very psychologically safe environment to have lots and lots of open discussions. I don't know that they would use the word crazy, but they were like, "Boss, that's nuts. Like, what the heck are you thinking?" And then we'd hash it out. The people around us thought we were crazy, and they weren't part of the culture, and they weren't part of what we were doing. And I really could dismiss them. I had employees who were bought into the concept of what we were doing, but we made it very clear that their job was very much so to come back and question us, right? To come back and say, "I don't understand what you're thinking here. I don't understand what you're doing here." And 95% of the time, we'd take the time and say, "Okay, talk to me about this." We put out something near the end of kind of when I was still owning the firm that said, "Here's what we're thinking about doing." And one of my employees came back with 17 questions. Somebody from outside of the firm was like, "That's really offensive." And I was like, "No, that's the most respectful thing he could have done." And none of them were disrespectful questions, right? But they were all really thoughtful questions. And I was like, some of them I was like, "Great question. Here's the answer." Some of them were, "Great question. What do you think the answer should be?" And some of them were, "Great question. I don't know yet." And some of them were, "Come on, that's enough. We're going to put that to the side because that's just
Yeah.
silly." And so we were able to have those open discussions to say, "Here's what I'm thinking. Here's what we're doing." And sometimes it slowed us down. Fine. And then there were some times when I had enough trust with the team that I could turn to them and say, "I heard you. I cannot answer you right now. You're going to have to trust me." And we had built enough trust in all of the discussions for them to go, "Okay, boss, great. Gotcha." So that's what we built as a culture. I think that was really critical.
I would definitely agree that having that level of engagement, you don't want people who are griping on the side or kind of behind the scenes or causing conflicts. The idea of the gateway versus the gatekeeper,
Yeah.
aspect. I mean, can you speak to some of that a little bit in that regard?
Yeah. And it's funny because DEI has become this kind of hot button issue. And putting aside any of the kind of hot button pieces of it, I think there's a way to conceive of bringing people in as either a gateway, you as a leader being a gateway or a gatekeeper, right? Gatekeeper turns around and says, "No, only you. I will choose who comes into the next layer," and really doesn't allow for anyone but who has traditionally been part of that to come up. Whereas a gateway gives you everyone an opportunity to prove themselves. It's not about bringing people up who don't deserve it. It's about allowing people in and giving them the tools to come in and really prove themselves, right? Without it, it's not picking winners and losers. It's literally the opposite. It's saying, "Okay, you guys show me who can do this. Let me give you the tools. Let me help." And I talk in the book about instead of just mentoring or sponsoring people, Sherpaing people, right? Being an actual Sherpa who packs along with them and helps them figure out not just what you've figured out yourself in your own career and your own journey, but what's happening to them that's different from what you experience. But because you have the expertise, you can help them figure that out.
So I always like to ask, do you have a working definition for resilience?
Oh gosh. So it's funny. I don't necessarily have a working definition for resilience, but I will tell you that two of the books around resilience that really spoke to me, Grit, obviously Angela Duckworth, Standard, Resilience, Grit, and it is something that I think when I read that first time, I loved it. It was like, yes, this is what really does get you there. But the flip side of that book, and I'm going to forget the author, but it's called Quit. And it is the flip side of that, because I think that there is sometimes where we get to resilience over everything else and putting your head down and getting through it. And look, that was certainly part of my success. But then I got to a point where, the mountains, you don't have to climb every single mountain you see in front of you just because it's there. You get to choose where you go and you get to choose where you don't go. And so I think there is a flip side to grit and resilience that allows you to make your own choices of what you're going to grit out and what you're going to choose not to do, even if everyone tells you you're supposed to do it. So I think that's the kind of balance that I look for. Certainly not the balance I always struck, but as I'm older, I'm starting to strike a little bit more.
For me, that kind of highlights this idea that some people, and no offense to whatever business or industry they're in, but some people outgrow the role that they're in
Yes.
and they need something new, something
Yeah.
different. And let's say you have someone comes to you that works for you and says, "Hey, I'm thinking about leaving."
If I've built a good culture that has encouraged you to grow, I've seen plenty of my employees go and do something new. Oftentimes they come back because it turns out the culture that we built was so important that they could find what they wanted to do next in the culture. But if I've done a good job, go please. You're going to go do great things somewhere else. I'm thrilled. And please stay in my village. Please stay in part of, keep me in your village of support and stay in our village and great. But that's the whole point of a leader. Like, I don't want to hold them to me just to hold them to me. If I've done my job, they're going to grow and they're supposed to grow.
Yeah. And it highlights like the opposite of that, right? It really highlights insecurity in the leader.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things I think that I learned it early when I was in graduate school, and I've kind of come back to it over the years, is the role of ego in success. And I will say I have a healthy ego, right? I have a pretty strong self-esteem. I know I'm pretty good at what I do. Not good at other things, and I know what I'm not good at, but I've got a pretty strong, stable self-esteem. I know exactly what I'm good at. And if you want to insult me over what I know I'm good at, it's not going to do anything to me because I know what I'm good at. And I'm like, okay, you think I'm not a good leader? Great. Got you. I know I'm actually a pretty good leader. You think I'm not a good speaker? I'm pretty sure I'm a good speaker at this point. I've done it enough and I've gotten enough response to know I can do that. If you're going to say that I'm a bad singer, you're absolutely right. I'm a terrible singer and it doesn't bother me, right? But it's the role of these fragile ego leaders that are the most toxic because they sit there and the emperor has no clothes, right? And everyone's tap dancing around the fact that they're not really good at X, Y, or Z. But if you tell them they're not, or if you somehow hint to them that they could get better at something or we could do something different than what they've said, they're going to get aggressive. They're going to, it's in psychology, it's called an ego threat. And when their ego is threatened, they lash out. Whereas when my ego is threatened, when someone who has a strong sense of self has an ego threat, they take it in and they go, is that true? Is there something here that I can do something with? And so I think one of the most misunderstood pieces of leadership is the role of ego and the ability to take in feedback based on the stability of your ego.
And being able to pour into your employees healthy behaviors, healthy mindsets. And honestly, that is the conversation that I'm really trying to push here. And thank you for saying that, because too many people are leaving jobs that they're really good at, but it's because of insecurity, narcissism in the leader, the threatening behavior, threatening sharing of information, all those things. And I just had a conversation recently, it's just how DEI talked about that. And that's, I think the next evolution of DEI is psychological safety, growth mindset, and accountability.
Yes.
It's not so much diversity, equity, and inclusion as much as it is what has that allowed us to explore and understand what is the current need in our business environments. And that's spot on. And definitely look forward to Unruly and what happens with this book and what happens, in the future for you. And how do people learn more about you? How do people connect?
Thank you. I am doing social media, which is so out of my comfort zone. I'm learning it as I go. Talk about thoughtful authenticity, which was my TED Talk. I am trying to be really authentic on social media, but it's I don't have a problem being authentic, but I have a problem being on social media. I don't know what I'm doing. So I'm learning. So give me a little bit of grace while we're building out this social media. So I'm on, Instagram and Facebook, and particularly on LinkedIn. I have a website, LaurenWittenbergWeiner.com, and the book is coming out. It's on all of the places. So hold on, there's the book. It's Unruly. It's on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. It should be in most or all of the indie bookstores, which are I love going to indie bookstores.
Oh, nice.
It comes out July 1st. We are doing some tours around particularly military kind of affiliated communities. So I'll be in Texas, we're in Tampa, we'll be up in DC. So look for me on any of the places, and please connect with me on all of the socials, because I'm doing a bunch of interactive kind of conversations like this one.
Nice. And Unruly podcast as well, right? Is that
Yes, I am doing Unruly the podcast. I'm gonna have to have you on mine. We're gonna have to flip flop. It'd be great.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm learning all of this stuff. We did a podcast years ago on government contracting. This one's a little bit more on kind of good leadership and all of the different unruly leaders I've seen over the years that have been phenomenal. I've gotten some great military and government people, but also some business leader actress who has her podcast is so much fun because it teaches us about how acting can drive leadership effectively. So there's a lot of fun, great conversations that we're having on it too.
Nice. And hey, congrats to you on the book and just everything that's happening. You've already seen success, and you definitely come across as someone very grateful for that success. And that's a huge part of future success. And so very, very admirable and very noble.
Thank
But
you so much.
yeah, congrats, and keep us posted. Any final word towards, let's say, someone who just taken over an office, very toxic culture? What do you say to them? How do you mentor them?
So the biggest advice I have for anyone in any relationship whatsoever, be it work related, be it with your kids, be it with your spouse, be it with your friends, I believe in non-transactional relationships. So figure out a way to make it a true, deep, meaningful relationship where you're giving without an expectation of getting. Figure out how to make that meaningful and real, and not a balanced relationship, because in the long run, that's what's going to make a meaningful connection. And then in the long run, that's what builds trust. That's what builds real, meaningful ability to connect as a team and to create a culture that's the exact opposite of toxic. So be looking for those opportunities to give without expecting anything in return, to show who you are and really be open and authentic to who you are without expecting anything again in return. If you can get away from transactional relationships, I think transactional begets transactional, and non-transactional begets non-transactional. And so if you end up with these transactional relationships, that's where that toxicity comes in. If you can get away from that that's where the meaningful, deep relationships that can build that culture come in.
That's great stuff. And just, I think it highlights a lot of fear that
Yes.
leaders may have of, well, I mean, this is a business. If I have to fire them, then like all those relationship stuff is going to come into play. And it's like, yeah, okay, so it does.
Cool. There's going to be things that are hard, but it's a whole lot easier, honestly, to let someone go and give them the ability to go to the next place that makes sense for them if you have this non-transactional relationship. If you're not so worried about yourself and your ego, you can, I mean, I've seen people leave us because it's no longer working and we've either mutually come to that decision or somebody has to get a little bit of a kind of push out the door. But if we can turn around and say, this doesn't seem to be working for us, but doesn't seem to be working for you either, let's figure out, again, non-transactionally, how to get you into the right place. And it works a whole lot better than firing somebody. But it works a whole lot better if you've got a relationship there and they believe that you care about where they're going to end up.
Well, that's brilliant. And I hope people really take that to heart. And honestly, I think they should meditate on that for a while. So we'll give them a month to meditate on this
Awesome.
conversation before the book comes out, and then they can dive into the book. So
Love it. Love
yeah.
it.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show. This has been great. And yeah, congrats again, and look forward to seeing what's next for you.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for having me again.
All right, my friends, that was Lauren Wittenberg Weiner, author of Unruly, coming out soon on July 1st. And hopefully you buy the book. Hopefully you dive into it. Hope this was giving you a lot to prep for what you're going to get into with the book. I think it's just going to be a really impactful book that we're really highlighting authenticity, highlighting just being cognizant of your world around you. A lot of people are in this like small space and don't realize just how much room you really have to run. And I think that's what she really pushes the envelope on. Props to her and her team and what they're really about to explore and take off with. And we're going to keep pushing for resilience here, keep fighting for resilience. And until next time, EB out here.